privileged to be here with you on this extremely special day of the year. And as we conclude saying Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd, we need to really internalize these days and understand the blessings of these days as we move forward. And like I said, this is an extremely blessed time, and in the Quran Allah says, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْدُودَاتٍ, remember Him in the appointed days. And in an authentic hadith related in Bukhari, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam once said, there is no deed that is better in the sight of Allah or more greatly rewarded than a good deed done in the first 10 days of al-Adha. And in these special days, as we celebrate Eid, Hajj pilgrims from all over the world have completed the day of Arafah, and they embark on the concluding of the manasik, or the rituals of Hajj. And this is specifically a time for us to retrace the footsteps of our Prophet Ibrahim, as he communicated to us by the beloved of God, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah describes Ibrahim by saying, وَلَقَدْ اسْتَفَيْنَاهُ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَإِنَّهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ لَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ وَإِذْ قَالَ لَهُ رَبُّهُ أَسْلِمْ قَالَ أَسْلَمْتُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. He was specifically chosen in this world, and he is among the righteous in the hereafter. When his Lord said to him to submit, he replied, I have submitted to the Lord of the universe. It is this complete submission that we seek to re-emulate and to learn from as we continue our lives. And as we all know the story of Ibrahim, we've all heard the story of the Prophet Ibrahim, but to go into it in a little bit of a deeper context and a deeper understanding. As a young man, we know that Ibrahim enters the temple of the idols, and he smashes all of the idols except for the biggest one. And in this particular circumstance, that can be interpreted in terms of spiritual allegory. The biggest idol is the hardest to overcome because it is the one that is inside you. It is the nafs. It is our self. It is our hawa, our desires. It is our shahwa, our inclinations. To break those desires and those inclinations is to break the biggest idol that is within us all. And it cannot be done with an axe or with a sword, but is done with self-restraint. A great scholar, Waliullah, once said, to carve hawa or desire out of one's heart is more difficult than carving a mountain with your fingernails. And Allah says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَىٰ. As for he who fears standing before God and restrains his nafs from hawa, paradise will be his permanent abode. And in this challenge, Ibrahim alayhi salam excels. At the climactic point of his spiritual journey, we know that Ibrahim is commanded to sacrifice his son Ismail. He and his son prepared to comply with the divine command without hesitation. This is an example of complete submission. His desire and his inclination are all subdued in his submission to the Almighty. And in doing so, he teaches us to overcome the biggest idol and to put our lives in the worship and service of Allah alone. And as the Quran explains, قُلْ إِنَّنِي هَدَانِي رَبِّي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ دِينًا قِيَمًا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And this translates to say, verily my Lord has guided me to the straight path, a correct religion, upholding the way of Abraham, and he did not commit shirk. Say, verily my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, my death are for Allah, the Lord of the universe. And we know that after Ibrahim destroys the false gods and he leaves the temple, or he leaves that place, we know that he goes and searches for the true divine, or the true Lord of the universe. And we know that he looks at the sun, and then he looks at the moon, and then he looks at the stars, and he reasons that these cannot be God simply because they overtake each other and they disappear at some point of the day or at night. And he says, لَا أُحِبُّ الْآفِلِينَ, I cannot love the one that sets, the one that disappears. In other words, two of his most early and fundamental spiritual realizations in his life are that God does not disappear. And it is a relationship predicated on love. And that will be the basic theme of my khutbah today. My dear brothers and sisters, please take a time to reflect and understand on this point that Allah does not disappear. He does not leave. He is not like the sun that sets in the nighttime. He is not like the stars that disappear in the daytime. Let us try to reflect on the implications of this. You know, when people face difficulty, they often say, where is God now? You know, when you go through hardship, when you face difficulty in your life, you tend to just kind of cut out everything from your life. And you try to wonder, you know, where is God at that point? However, if we are truly grounded in the reality that God does not disappear, we realize that the real question then is not where is God, but rather where are we? When did we walk away from Him? When did we go so far astray? And to realize that God does not disappear is essential because it properly puts into perspective our distance from Him. And the famous poet that I mentioned a lot, Rumi, reminds us that the man's asking the question, where is God, is the same exact way as a fish asking, where is this water? And God's presence is more, ubiquitous and all around us than the water is for the fish in the ocean. And in the famous Hadith Qudsi, Allah decrees, I am as my servant expects me, and I am with him as he remembers me. And one implication from that text is that if we imagine a world with an absent God or without a God, then He will fulfill that reality for us. If we forget Him, He will also not remember us. And as He says, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ, remember me and I will remember you. For those who are aware of God's presence, He is everywhere. Present at every juncture, at every space, at every moment, at every turn in your life. And for those who are unaware of His presence, He is seemingly nowhere for them. This is illustrated with a simple story for everyone. So there was a pious woman who was very poor, and she had a lot of crying children at her house. She did not have any food to give them. She prayed, oh Allah, please give me food for myself and for my children. Her neighbor, who did not believe in God, who was an atheist, he told her, if you want food, go to the market. And if you don't have anything, go and beg people. Your God isn't going to do anything for you. And as the day went on, the woman continued to pray, and because there was no food, her children continued to cry and cry and cry. And eventually the neighbor heard the children crying, the atheist neighbor, and he felt compelled to help. And what did he do? He brought food for her and left her on her doorstep. You see, God works in extremely mysterious ways. You see, He said, if you want God to really give you, if you want to get food, you have to go do it yourself. God's not going to do anything for you. What ended up happening? God actually worked through that guy to give her the food and to leave it on her doorstep. And the bottom line of what I have been saying about all this so far is that the perception of God's presence is dependent on our own faith, the state of our own hearts. And so we remind ourselves that He does not disappear, and that He is always with us, and that His presence is extremely beyond our rational comprehension. And the Quran says, وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ وَمَا تَسْقُطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ وَلَا رَطْبٍ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. And with Him are the keys of the unseen. None knows them except Him, and He knows what is on the land and in the sea. Not a leaf falls but that He knows it, and no grain is there within the darknesses of the earth, and no moist or dry thing but that it is written in a clear record. And as the Quran tells us in this verse, there is not even a leaf that falls from a tree whose existence and trajectory aren't fully within God's decree and His knowledge at all times. His knowing, His decree, His presence are beyond the capacity of our imaginations, and their completeness should be a source of faith and comfort for us. And while we are vulnerable and weak, the Quran reminds us, لا ملجأ من الله إلا إليه. There is no refuge in anyone except for Him. And we know the story that on the Hijrah, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was hiding in the cave with his companion Abu Bakr, while the Quraysh searched for him, we know that in that story Abu Bakr became extremely afraid. And yet as the Quran records, the Prophet ﷺ soothes Abu Bakr in that moment when their lives are in danger by saying, لا تحزن إن الله معنا. Do not worry, God is with us. And that is the verse that I want to expand on in the second portion of the khutbah. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, remorse is repentance, so repent unto Allah and ask Him for forgiveness, for He is the forgiver, the merciful. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In the name of God, and exaltations be unto Him. May peace and blessings always be on our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so to reiterate and to re-summarize some of the points that we've been talking about, we ended by saying the story about Abu Bakr in the cave with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says to him, لا تحزن إن الله معنا, that do not worry, God is with us. And this period of time Hajj specifically, is pretty much the annual Muslim convention. It's an opportunity for us to look at our collective states. You can call it the State of the Union, in fact. But actually, in our case, it's the state of disunion, unfortunately. And there's so many reasons for that. Whether you look at the Uyghurs that are suffering in China, to the Rohingya in Burma, to the Muslims in India, the people of Kashmir, the people of Iraq, of Syria, of Afghanistan, of Libya, of Sudan, of Somalia, of Palestine, of Yemen, and the list goes on and on. Muslims are in pain all around the world. And this, sometimes when we take a look at that, it might make us feel as if it's hopeless, as if there is no brighter picture at the end of this. There's no light at the end of the tunnel for all of us. And it makes us feel hopeless and sad and depressed, and sometimes it feels like we might as well just give up. But Hamza Yusuf once said that we absolutely cannot do that, and that when we say that everything is over, when we say that there is no hope anymore, what's the purpose of even trying anymore? When we say stuff like that, what we're doing is that we are disgracing all those Africans that were brought over in chains, that survived the transatlantic crossing to come here as slaves. And then later on they marched and died for their civil rights. We're telling them that all of that was a complete waste of time. When we say that it's hopeless, that there's no room left for hope for any of us anymore, what we're saying is that those Muslims that used to live in Andalusia, in Spain, and what was called paradise at that time, what we're saying to them is that when they were kicked out of their homes by Queen Isabella and the conquistadors, we're telling them that everything that they did to try to make better lives for themselves in Tunisia and in Morocco, we're telling them that was all a waste of time. We're telling all the Indians that migrated to Pakistan in search of a better life, we're telling them that that was all a waste of time. The Afghanis that have been holding their heads high for I don't know how many decades of war, we're telling them that all of this is a complete waste of time. And that is something that we absolutely cannot do. We cannot do that at all. We must hold our heads high. My dear brothers and sisters, we must never forget this point, that God is ever present, and no matter what trying circumstances we are facing, like Abu Bakr and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the cave, no matter what challenges stare at us, no matter what sorrow we have, no matter who is threatening us, no matter how constrained our situation may seem, no matter how much difficulty we have to endure, we must find solace in His presence and in the completeness of His knowledge and the wisdom of His decree and His plan. And as the Quran says and reminds us that do not despair from the hope of God, and more emphatically, it says no one despairs from the hope of God except for those who reject Him. And so in reflecting upon God's presence, the first point was that the perception of God's presence is completely dependent on the state of our own faith and the state of our own hearts. And the second is that His eternal and constant presence is the source of our comfort and our strength. And He is with us and He will take care of us. Now if you put both of those points together, He will take care of us, but we have to trust Him. We have to put our faith and we have to give Him our hand. As the Quran describes to us that the hand of God was above their hands, meaning the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. But the thing is, we all keep resisting. We often keep trying to pull away. We keep doubting and we keep trying to walk in the other direction. We don't give Him our hand to begin with. And yet, the crazy thing is that even as we walk away, He waits for us to come back, to turn around. We know that He decrees in the Hadith Qudsi. He says, "He who walks to me, I will run towards him." And so God does not disappear. We may try to walk away, but He is still there. We may try to pull our hand back, but He is still there, waiting for us to turn back to Him and to rely upon Him to navigate our way. And the last point that I will make about His presence is that it is absolutely imminent. We live in a world where science offers an explanation for the mechanics of the world. Because we focus on the mechanics, we often think and feel that God just kind of created this world and then just took a step back and left everything the way it is. We see the cause and effect all around us, but the majority opinion of classical Muslim scholars and theologians in history have said that, he obviously, cause and effect are an illusion created by the consistency of God's action. Meaning that He is not far away, He never stepped away. He is not somebody that just made everything and took a back seat somewhere. The world is not a self-sufficient enterprise that can exist independent of Him. Our life is not a reality that exists independent of Him. Our coming in contact with Him is not a distant reality. Hayhata lima tu'adun. Far, far away is what you promise, is what the disbelievers say. And yet, because we live life as if He did step away, as if the world is a self-sufficient enterprise, as if God really is just one of our mutual friends on Facebook, it's just a distant reality that we can hope for, and a far distance or long distance relationship at best that we can hope for from God, if that's the mentality that we have. Excuse me. And when the Sahaba asked the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ if their dua should be an intimate discourse or a calling out, Allah revealed to them, "When my servant asks of me, verily I am near." In other words, it means that it should be imminent. And again, that means that God is ever present and that He has not disappeared. He is not far. He is always there waiting for you. And with that, we come back full circle, because as we know, Ibrahim a.s. realizes and actualizes that reality, that God is not his long-distance friend, but rather Ibrahim is Khalilullah, the intimate friend of God. And we use the word, the intimate friend of God at that point because he attained an unparalleled level of love and station of spiritual nearness, made possible only through the special choosing that God bestowed upon him. And I just want to give you another quick story, just to emphasize the point on the love that he had for Allah. So if you imagine a beautiful tree, a tree gives shade. It is home to the birds, to the squirrels, to the insects, to so many of God's creatures that we can't even see. This tree has a vine that is going around it. And the water the tree gathers with its roots, it gives to the vine. And the energy that tree generates with its leaves and photosynthesis, it also gives to that vine. Everything the tree does, it does for that vine. And its branches are for the vine, its roots are for the vine, its bark is for the vine. The vine grows along the tree, and as it does, the tree and the vine become difficult to distinguish. And in Arabic, the vine that I am describing is called ashqa, and the tree is ashik. And this is love, and this is the origin of the word ishq, the ultimate love for the divine that our poets describe. And that's why Ibrahim, like I said, is Khalilullah, through the unparalleled level of love and station of spiritual nearness, made possible only through God's choosing bestowed upon him. And as we know from the story, there isn't anything that he wouldn't sacrifice for his submission and in his love for the divine. And I don't want to take too much time, but I just want to harp on this point for 1 second. If you think about, the sacrifice that he made, to have to go and to sacrifice your son. Just understand, the implications of that in your brain for a second. And that's not even the full story. The whole story is that, when Ibrahim initially left for this journey, we know that he's going on his way to sacrifice Ismail, his son, at this point. As we know in the story, Shaitan comes up to him and he tries to talk him out of it. A couple times. He comes up to him. And we know that, when he first comes, Ibrahim starts to throw the rocks at him, right? And this is where we got that ritual from, is that we throw the stones at Shaitan. And so Shaitan leaves, but then on his journey he comes back again. And so Ibrahim has to throw rocks yet again. And then he leaves and comes back another time. And Ibrahim has to continue to throw rocks at him 3 times to get him to stay away. And the question is that, why is this the one ritual or the one portion of Hajj that we continue to process for 3 days? We do this process for 3 days throughout Hajj when we're throwing the rocks at Shaitan. But everything else is just completed 1 time, and the question is why? And if we look at the story of Abraham, we know that when he descends from Mina to the place of Aqaba, we know how Shaitan continues to try and talk him out of it. And the punchline of that story is to again emphasize the point that Shaitan is the biggest enemy. And the idea that he is extremely persistent, no matter what we do. Even though we know Prophet Ibrahim is a spiritual master, a spiritual giant, one of the greatest people to walk this earth. Shaitan is the biggest enemy, and he still did not give up. After being pelted once, after being pelted twice, it took him 3 times to get him to stay away from him. He is an extremely worthy opponent. And the Quran says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ كَانَ لِلْإِنسَانِ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. Verily, he is a clear enemy, an open enemy, an unabated enemy to man. إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُم مِّنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُم. He sees you from a vantage point where you do not see him. And Shaitan says, فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأَقْعُدَنَّ لَهُمْ صِرَاطَكَ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ. Because I have been deceived, I will stop them on the path of righteousness as well. ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُم مِّن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ. I will attack them from the front, from the rear, from the right, from the left, and you will find most of them to be unthankful. استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله أولئك حزب الشيطان ألا إن حزب الشيطان هم الخاسرون. Shaitan has gained mastery over them and made them forget the remembrance of God. They are the party of Shaitan, and verily the party of Shaitan will be the losers. So when you look at all these points that the Quran makes about Shaitan, the list can keep going on and on. We see that he is constantly attacking us. He is attacking us not just from the front, he's attacking us in many different ways, in very creative ways. He attacks us in so many different ways because of how conniving he is. And if you continue, he says, وَقَاسَمَهُمَا إِنِّي لَكُمَا لَمِنَ النَّاصِحِينَ. When he came to Adam and Eve, he actually said to them, I only came to give you advice. I'm your well-wisher. I'm your friend. I'm here for you. You know, he comes in many different ways. And in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانَ يَجْرِي مِنَ الْإِنسَانِ مَجْرَى الدَّمِ. That verily Shaitan flows through the human being like the flowing of blood. And Shaitan runs through people like blood. And Shaitan whispers to people. He distracts them. Just like we're always distracted by our screens and our devices. Never focus on anything. Because if you're actually trying to focus on something, then you can accomplish stuff. So when Shaitan is distracting you, he's doing it for a purpose. To make sure that you stay off track of what you're trying to do. And there's a book about the ancient Chinese philosophy called The Art of War, written by Sun Tzu in around 500 BC. And he said, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear 100 battles. And if you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory that you gain, you will also suffer one defeat. And if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will be defeated in every battle. And to tie all this back in, I'm just trying to emphasize the point of what sacrifices Ibrahim really had to make in this moment when he went to sacrifice his son. Imagine all of this happening while having to sacrifice your son. This is not something that any normal human being or any ordinary human being would be able to do. But as we know that God is ever gracious and he is merciful, and he returns that sacrifice back to Ibrahim. For he returns everything manifold, and he is only making his loving presence and his mercy and his grace known. And so I apologize for going so long, but I want to end with this point now. And as we continue the story of Ibrahim, we know that God commands Abraham to settle his wife Hajar and his son Ismail in the middle of the desert of Makkah. And while there's absolutely no water, no vegetation, no population, no town, no civilization at all, Abraham knows that there is Allah, and therefore there is nothing to fear at that moment. And as we know from the story, as Ismail begins to cry from thirst, Hajar's love as a mother propels her to run between Mount Safa and Mount Marwa, searching for water desperately for her son. But God is ever present, and his mercy and his love are much greater than that of a mother's mercy towards her child. And soon the spring of Zamzam begins to gush forth from the ground. And this spring is so abundant that obviously continues to exist to today. And a well is given, a town is built, a civilization is born, and God's greatest gifts, the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, are brought forth. These are the spiritual corollaries to Zamzam, abundant, everlasting forces that quench the deepest thirst and give life to the darkest souls. And Abraham's prayer, رَبَّنَا وَابْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ. Our Lord, send upon them a messenger from amongst themselves who will recite them upon them your signs, is fulfilled. And I want to end now that, my dear brothers and sisters, we have all walked away from God. And we have all forgotten that he is ever present, that he does not disappear. We have come into a spiritual desert, all of us. It is hard for us to see that he is still right there, because the reception on our devices seems to be out of range from God now. But even in this desert, from the stories that we've heard, he has given us this spiritual Zamzam, the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the revealed word in the Quran, so that we can turn back. And as we turn back, as we begin to turn back, we call out to Him, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. I am here, my Lord, I am here. And this is an affirmation, but it is also a call for help. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. I am here, Lord, I am here. And as we begin to take that one baby step towards God, He begins to run towards us. And that is what we celebrate in these days. That is a living legacy of the Prophet Ibrahim and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is why these are extremely joyous days. And I hope and I pray that the spiritual light of these days illuminates the year to come. Allahumma ahdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik lana fi ma atayt, wa qina bi rahmatika wasrif anna sharra ma qadayt, fa innaka taqdi wa la yuqda alayk, innahu la yadillu man walayta wa la yu'izzu man adayt, tabarakta rabbana wa ta'alayt. Allahumma innaka afuwan kareemun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Allahumma innaka afuwan kareemun tuhibbul afwa fa'fu anna. Allahumma إنك عفو كريم تحب العفو فاعف عنا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. Rejoice and celebrate the happiness of the coming days and embrace your brothers and sisters with the joy of Eid. Eid Mubarak to everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.